Our second learning target in Unit 6 is very similar to our first, but instead of having variables on only one side of the equation, we now have them on both. It really just adds an extra step, but it's not too complicated. Hopefully by the end of this video, you're fairly confident in dealing with this situation. In our first problem, that's about as simple as you're going to get for this learning target. We want to notice that the 6x and the 8x are on different sides of the equal sign. So we can't just combine like terms because they're on opposite sides. Instead, what we have to do is bring all of our variables to the same side. So in order to do that, we're going to take the smaller one and we're going to get rid of it. So if we have 6x and 8x, 6x is smaller, so we want to get rid of it. So the opposite of 6x is negative 6x. And if we subtract it, it's gone. All we have left is 7. If we subtract it on the right-hand side, because remember what you do to one side, you have to do to the other, we're left with 2x minus 13. And now it looks just like our equations from the first learning target. We add our constant, so we're going to add 13 to both sides. And 7 plus 13 gives us 20. And that's equal to 2x because the negative 13 and the positive 13 cancel out. From there, you just divide by your coefficient of 2 to find that x is equal to 10. And that's your answer. Our second example is very similar to the first one. The only difference is we're back to having to use the distributive property. So we're going to distribute that 2 to everything inside of the parentheses. Anytime we have parentheses like this, we want to make sure that we're distributing to get rid of them. So 2 times 1.15b will be 2.3b. And 2 times 4.15 is going to be 8.3. And then the left-hand side of our equation simply drops down. And now it's just like the equation that we just did. We want to move our smaller variable so that all of our variables on the same side. So if we have 13.7b and 2.3b, our smallest variable will be the 2.3b. So we're going to subtract to get rid of it. And on the left-hand side, that will cancel out. And on the left-hand side, that'll give us 11.4b. Make sure when we're dropping this negative 8.3, we don't lose track of that negative. Notice how I still put it in there. And now we have a variable only on the left-hand side, so we want to get rid of that constant that's with it. So that negative 6.5 needs to be added to both sides. When we do that, we get 11.4b is equal to negative 8.3 plus 6.5, which is negative 1.8. And then our last step is to divide by our coefficient, the 11.4. And that's actually going to give us a really small decimal. So we'll just round it off to negative 0.16. And that's our answer. The third problem is very similar to the second. We still have that distributive property. So we're just going to take it and multiply everything on the inside of the parentheses by it. Negative 2 times 18 is going to be negative 36. And negative 2 times negative 3y is going to be positive 6y. And that's equal to 7y plus 2y. Now, before we want to start moving stuff around, we want to remember to combine our like terms. So on the right-hand side, we have 7y and plus 2y. We can put those together to get 9y. And everything else will drop down. And then from here, we have 6y and 9y on opposite sides of the equation. Since we only have a constant on the left, we'll go ahead and get rid of that 6y by subtracting. And we'll be left with negative 36 is equal to 3y. And then our last step is just to divide by our coefficient. And we get that y is equal to negative 12. Now, when we look at these first three problems, we lucked out. There's no fractions. But our fourth problem has a fraction. It's okay. Don't freak out. I know we have to fight the urge, but we can handle it. Remember, when you see a fraction, the easiest way to get rid of it is simply to multiply by the denominator. I like to multiply by the larger denominator first, so in this case that's 4. Because sometimes, and you'll see it here, when you do that, the second fraction will just go away. So here, the 4's cancel out, and we're just left with s. 20 times 4 is 80. And then negative 1/2 times 4 is negative 4 over 2, which if you put it into Desmos, negative 1/2 times 4 is actually just equal to negative 2. So you don't have to multiply by two fractions. Multiplying by one gets rid of the other. And then 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. And now, if you didn't have any trouble with the problems up here, especially this one right here, then this problem hopefully will be no problem for you either. So we have s and we have negative 2s. The smaller one is actually negative 2s, so we're going to get rid of that. And it'll cancel out. And then we'll add 2s to the left-hand side as well. That'll give us 3s plus 80 is equal to negative 16. And now we want to get rid of our constants that are on the same side as the variable. When we do that, we'll subtract 80 from both sides. It'll cancel out on the left, and we're just left with 3s. And on the right, that gives us negative 96. And then our last step is just to divide by our coefficient. So our coefficient is 3. And negative 96 divided by 3 is going to give us negative 32. And that's our answer. Our fifth problem in this learning target is a bit of a mix between what we saw in our first learning target and in our second learning target. And the reason I say that is because we've been doing distributive property in all of these, but this is a callback to the first problem in the first learning target where you have a negative sign and you need to input a 1 so that you remember that when you distribute, you're actually distributing negative 1. So negative 1 times 12 will be negative 12x, and negative 1 times positive 6 is negative 6. And then on the right-hand side, we actually have to do the distributive property again. So negative 10 times 8x is negative 80x, and negative 10 times positive 13 is negative 130. And now it's the same as the problems we've been doing. So our first step is to get rid of our smaller variable. We have negative 12x and negative 80x. Negative 80x is actually smaller, despite it having a larger magnitude. So we're going to add it to both sides. And on the right-hand side, it'll just go away, and we're left with negative 130. And then on the right-hand side, negative 12 plus 80x is 68x. From there, we get rid of our coefficient. Sorry, not our coefficient, our constant. We'll add it on both sides. And we're left with 68x is equal to negative 124. Then we divide by our coefficient. And we're left with x is equal to 1.8-ish if we round it. And then our last problem, we're going to have to do the distributive property as well as combining like terms. Remember, you see parentheses, the first thing you want to do is get rid of them. So 2 times x is 2x, 2 times 3 is 6, and everything else simply drops down. And then we want to combine our like terms. So we have plus 3x and plus 2x. We cannot add the 6 to that because it does not have an x. So 2 plus 3 is 5. The plus 6 just drops down. And then we want to get rid of our smaller variable. So 2x is smaller than 5x, so we're going to subtract it on both sides. And we're left with 3x plus 6 is equal to negative 9. We want to get rid of our constant, so we get rid of that 6 on both sides. And we're left with 3x is equal to negative 15. Then we divide by our coefficient, and x is equal to negative 5. Just like in the first learning target, remember if you want to check any of these answers, all you have to do is plug it into the original equation and you'll be able to find your answer.